So I was the closest eyewitness to the TWA Flight 800 crash that happened on July 17th, 1996. And I haven't thought about this in a while, but I have a story that involves that tragic event. It involves the FBI. It involves a conspiracy theory from a photo that was taken that had my dad in it. And then it also contains a love story from this place called the Boardy Barn. Before sharing this story, I want to share my sincere condolences for anyone that was affected by the crash of TWA Flight 800. The evening of July 17th, 1996 was absolutely beautiful, and I was camping on the beach with my girlfriend at the time, and we were just looking off into the distance, and we noticed a red glowing fireball falling from the sky, and then maybe about a quarter mile over the water, it exploded and flames cascaded down to the water, and we were like, what was that? But we were not connected to the internet, and there was really no way to figure out what happened. But then we started noticing some boats heading out towards the horizon, and then helicopters began to surveil the scene. And we were scratching our heads. We were like, really, what's going on here? An hour or so after we saw the fireball, police came down to the beach and told us what had happened, and they asked us to pack up and go home. A plane traveling from New York to Paris had exploded in flight and crashed off the coast of West Hampton. It's incredibly sad. I don't recall the number of souls that were lost, but it was just a massive, massive tragedy. The next morning, we got a phone call from my girlfriend at the time's dad, who was a detective in the Southampton Town Police Department, and he wanted to introduce us to the FBI who were working the case. They wanted to interview us because we were the closest eyewitnesses on the ground to what had transpired the evening before. So we met with the FBI, they interviewed us, we shared everything that we could, although really we didn't see anything except for what I had described earlier. Hold that thought about the FBI guys. The night of the tragic event, my dad, who was the supervisor of the town of Southampton, was having a fundraiser at this place on Dune Road in East Quogue called Dockers. He would have fundraisers all the time, and his assistant at the time was an amazing photographer, and she was taking tons and tons of pictures as she normally would. And the day after the tragic events, Linda was going through all of her photography, and in a photo that contains like the shoulder of my dad, I'll show it to you in a minute, you can see what appears to be a missile. It looks kind of like a cigar in flight with a glowing end. But everyone inspected this picture. This thing became like a global conspiracy picture that sparked the conspiracy theory that the plane was taken down by a missile. If you look in the top, you see something that looks kind of like a cigar. With maybe a flame at the end, and that white blob at the right, that's my dad. Enter the FBI and the Boardy Barn again. So the FBI agents come down to the Boardy Barn. As promised, I'm feeding them some beers, and one of the FBI guys is like, hey, could you introduce us to some women? And I pointed down the bar to a group of regulars who I knew that would come by every Sunday, and whatever, it looked like they hit it off and they were dancing and having a good time, whatever. I didn't think anything of it until years and years later. I ended up working at this search engine called Excite in the late 90s. And everyone that I worked with at Excite knew that I also worked at the Boardy Barn. They would come out on the weekends and hang out and play. But like 2 years later, this one woman that I worked with at Excite was like, hey, do you remember that day at the Boardy Barn when the FBI came in? I'm like, yeah, I remember that, but like, why on earth do you remember that? And she said, well, you introduced the FBI guys to a group of girls, and I was in that group, and I actually hooked up with one of the FBI guys. So it was just so wild how, you know, we see this like terribly tragic event. That same night, my dad is having a fundraiser, and he's in a photograph that becomes really fodder for a global conspiracy theory about this plane being taken down by a missile. And then I end up introducing the FBI guys to a group of women at this bar that I work at called the Boardy Barn. And many, many years later, I find out that a new colleague is someone that I actually, unbeknownst to me at the time, connected with the FBI agent, and they apparently had a good time. So yeah, just a wild sequence of events, and I don't know what made me think of this, probably because I'm sitting down at the beach and it's another beautiful day, just like it was way back on July 17th, 1996.